everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Caitlin and I upload a whole bunch of different types of videos on this channel, mainly surrounding true crime and psychological cases, as well as a little bit of fashion and lifestyle sprinkled in where I can. Now today I'm back discussing another unsolved case, and this time it is the case of Shelley Morgan. So if you want to hear a little bit about the case, then keep on watching, but first we're just going to jump straight into my usual disclaimer. I am by no means claiming to be an expert in this case, nor any of the other cases that I cover on my channel. I'm simply relaying the information that I'm able to find myself through research online, and because only certain pieces of information are actually accessible to me, I apologise if I get things wrong, if I miss anything out, if I mispronounce anything. I don't mean to do anyone any harm or an injustice, I'm simply only able to access certain pieces of information. So with all that being said, we shall just go ahead and get started discussing the case of Shelley Morgan. Shelley Morgan was born in the year of 1951 in Iowa in the United States, and that's pretty much the extent of the details that's known about Shelley's early life. Some sources claim that Shelley's sister has since shared some stories about Shelley as a young child being talented at making clothes and all these like stuffed animals and toys for her and her friends. So it seems that from a very young age she was very talented with all things textile related. When Shelley was a young adult, she travelled to a number of places, including Italy, on placement and study opportunities, which is really cool. And it ultimately helped her decide she wanted to move to Liverpool in the United Kingdom to pursue an opportunity working as a wardrobe manager at a theatre there. And so this is what she did. When she was still a young adult, she decided to up her life and start a new one in Liverpool in the UK, working for the Liverpool Playhouse as a wardrobe manager, which was really cool. It's a big step, and here she just made a new life for herself. A few years after moving to the UK, Shelley met a man named Nigel, and he would very soon become her husband. The young couple then decided that they wanted to move to a small Welsh village to start their life together, and this was where they later had two children, a boy named Liam and a girl named Charlotte. When Liam was very young, the couple learned that he was actually autistic, and they were told he would need to seek out additional help just to ensure that he would be able to develop socially and developmentally at the same rate of other children his age. And so because of this, they decided to move to Bristol in the UK in order to have direct access to the best forms of education and therapy that was possible to them at the time. Fast forward to the year of 1984, where Shelley Morgan's case takes place on the 11th of June. It's a seemingly normal Monday morning, and Shelley heads out in the early hours of the morning with her two young children to walk them to the bus stop, where they usually catch the bus to school. She decided that she was going to take photographs and sketching images, I believe, of the local landmark called the Avon Gorge once she dropped off the children. And so when she left the house that morning with the two kids, she also had with her a multicoloured bag that held an Olympus OM20 camera and a tripod. Now it's worth noting that at this specific time her husband Nigel was on a short trip away, and so he was staying in their second home that they had in a place called Brecon Beacons, and so Shelley was essentially only in the company of her two young children. Later that day, when Liam and Charlotte finished school, concern began to grow for Shelley as she hadn't come to pick up the two children, and this was very out of character for her, just normally, let alone when her husband was away as well. So it's not as though she could have maybe had a bit of miscommunication with Nigel, maybe expecting him to go and pick them up. There wasn't any of that because she was looking after them alone, and so people began to get very concerned very quickly. Law enforcement were very quick to be alerted of the case, considering the fact that there was a lot at stake really, especially with the fact that Shelley was alone looking after these two young children. So up until they could find her, they had these two kids that had been stranded, and there was also no indication of any other explanation. It didn't seem like she was planning on going on a trip, she didn't seem to be with anyone, there wasn't really any other explanation, and so they were very quick to jump on this case. And Shelley was listed as a missing person of high priority, and they immediately began to attempt to piece together any idea of movement or timeline following her dropping off the kids on their way to school. And they didn't really have a lot to go on, to be honest with you. Investigators believed that after saying goodbye to the children, she jumped on a bus herself that took her straight to the main bus station in the Bristol city centre, which is where she then jumped on the number 359 bus, which took her to Portishead, I believe is how you pronounce it. Although this is more of an educated guess, they began to publicly appeal for any sort of information, maybe anyone seen her or a woman that looked like her, to see if they could piece together any sort of solidified movement, any sort of timeline that they could make based on fact. This was more what they could only gather from very minute pieces of information that they could find. From this very public appeal, a number of potential leads were brought forward, a few in particular that had repeatedly mentioned the sighting of a driver in a blue van spotted allegedly speaking to Shelley Morgan outside a place called Ashton Court. One witness also believed to see a woman matching Shelley Morgan's description inside of a yellow lorry parked on Backwell Hill Road, while others reported a BMW as being related in some way to her disappearance. However, none of these sightings, there were quite a lot of sightings bearing in mind, none of them amounted to anything useful in terms of the investigation into her disappearance. Within the months following her disappearance, the show Crime Watch broadcast an episode that was dedicated to her case, which, as typical, led to a sudden influx in reports being potentially linked to her disappearance, with one anonymous phone call in particular standing out amongst the rest. This caller claimed that they had a specific location in which they would find the remains of Shelley Morgan in a watery grave. They followed the directions and they sent in a number of professional divers in anticipation of finding at least some piece of evidence that showed that she had been involved in some way at this location. However, nothing was retrieved, not even as much as any minuscule pieces of evidence that suggest that it was related to Shelley in any way, and therefore this phone call was ruled out as being a cruel hoax. Despite law enforcement's active attempts to spread awareness and further the search for Shelley Morgan, little to no advances were made up until October of that very same year, 4 months after Shelley disappeared. On October the 14th, 1984, a young boy was walking in the wooded area in Backwell Hill, not too far from Bristol Airport. It was here he came across a set of human remains without clothing and a pair of rip tights found around the ankles. It was then confirmed through a comparison of dental records that these human remains were in fact a match to that of 34-year-old Shelley Morgan. The team who conducted a search of the surrounding area around where the remains were found also discovered a pair of women's sandals in a bush nearby to the body. The result of the autopsy carried out on the remains ultimately determined that her cause of death had actually been a total of 14 stab wounds to her back, with there also being evidence of the attack having a sexual motive. One of the notable elements included in the description given out when Shelley Morgan originally disappeared had been that she wears these very distinctive, thick-framed glasses in a bright red colour. These, as well as all of the other items that she'd been known to be carrying that day, including the camera and the bag, were never recovered. In more recent years, an apparent development was made in the case when a set of postcards that appeared to have been a number of years old were discovered in an undisclosed location. The postcards were traced back to being sold in a local Bristol hospice charity, and the reason these postcards are so important, they're such a key element in relation to this case, is that the images on these postcards allegedly are significant in the sense that one of them shows an image of where Shelley would have been on the day when she disappeared, and the other one shows an image of where her remains are found, but from different perspectives. So the first card depicts the River Avon in Bristol, which was allegedly one of the locations that she had planned on taking photos of on the day of her disappearance. The other showed a photo of St Andrew's Church taken from the perspective of Backwell Hill, which is where her remains were found. Investigators believe that the postcards were torn off of a calendar product that included these tearaway images as part of the product, and they remain particularly eager to hear from anyone who may have perhaps bought this calendar, and specifically who held on to these two images and none of the others, as it may just be a coincidence, but it does also seem to be more than a coincidence that the only two images found, the only two postcards found together, are both extremely specific to the locations that are involved in Shelley Morgan's case. In addition to this, the investigators are still in search of her missing belongings. So as I said, a number of her items were never recovered, including her distinctive glasses, her camera bag, her camera, which was an Olympus OM20 with the serial number 1032853. I just thought that in particular was worth noting. A lot of people on Reddit have said that they spend a little bit of time researching like eBay listings and things in terms of serial numbers, so I just thought that might be worth looking into. And unfortunately, that is the end of Shelley Morgan's case. Her case remains unsolved to this day. No one knows who murdered her or why. Those poor children lost their mother, their husband lost his wife. It was just an awful case. It seemed very unprovoked. It seemed very, very unexpected. I know that's a weird thing to say about murder cases since they should all be kind of unexpected in a sense, but she seemed like a very, very harmless woman who didn't have any enemies. She didn't exactly know loads of people in the area because she was relatively new there, and so it's just awful to hear of this poor woman being attacked and killed in such a brutal way without there being any answers. So let me know your guys' thoughts down below. I'm sure there are a lot of theories surfacing on the internet and just being discussed, so let me know your thoughts. Also, let me know down below if you have any specific case requests. I'm always looking for new suggestions to add to my research list. And that is everything we're going to discuss today. I hope you guys found this interesting, and I shall see you guys very soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.